welcome to the fourth of our special webinars this year on sustainability in lighting. Today's event is organised by Ricolite, the UK's leading compliance body for waste, electrical and electronic equipment regulations. I'm Ray Molony. I'm the head of content at the Build Back Better Awards, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour and a half or so. Today, we're discussing the role of the lighting specifier in the circular economy, be that a lighting or interior designer, a consulting engineer, an architect, or a contractor, or indeed even the client. Now, as you know, specifiers are pivotal in driving the uptake of circular economy principles in projects. They often have direct access to the clients, and they can have those crucial conversations about product life cycles, end of life management, and sustainability. And as you can see, we have a stellar lineup of speakers, and our panel today are Bob Bohannon, who is the head of Academy and Policy at the Lighting Industry Association and formerly president of the Society of Light and Lighting. We have Sophie O'Rourke, who is a lighting designer at Nulty and a founder member of the Green Light Alliance. We have Mark Ridler, head of lighting at BDP. Kristina Allison, who is senior lighting designer at Atkins in the UK, and she's also chair of the Society of Light and Lighting's Education Committee. We have Bruce Wheel, who's co-owner of the lighting design studio based in London. Now, this is a practice that's endeavoring to put circular economy principles at the very heart of what it does. And finally, we have Nigel Harvey, who's CEO of Ricolite. Now, just taking a look at the agenda, we have Bob and Kristina are going to kick us off, and they're going to discuss the Technical Memorandum 66 from SIBSI and the Society of Light and Lighting, creating a circular economy in the lighting industry. Now, if you're not familiar with TM66, this is what I would call an algorithm which quantifies how circular a lighting product actually is. And that is clearly a key to empowering specifiers to make informed choices and to create specifications that are pretty robust in their circularity. So it's a real breakthrough document, and I'm delighted to say that earlier this year it won it was awarded a green and platinum in the Build Back Better Awards. So congratulations to Bob and Kristina. Next up, we have Mark, who has what I think is a brilliant title to his talk: "A luminaire isn't circular unless the project is too." So we look forward to that. He'll be followed by Sophie, who will tell us all about the Green Light Alliance. And then we have Bruce, who will tell us about the Lighting Design Studio's philosophy and how circular lighting fits into all that. And finally, we're pleased to have Nigel joining the panel's discussion and sharing his insights. A few bit of housekeeping. Today is one of a series of webinars on this topic. Now, if you missed the ones earlier this year on legislation for lighting, the return of the replaceable lamp, and how to go net zero, you can listen to a replay on the Ricolite website. You simply go to ricolite.co.uk and follow the links. Now, you can also register there for two upcoming webinars. Now, on Thursday, the 7th of October, we have a bonus special, which we introduced recently, which is on extending the life of luminaires. Now, this will explore what we do with light fittings that are removed during a refurbishment. Now, it's not about recycling the components, but it's rather an exploration of how a luminaire's life can be extended and how it can be reused effectively. On Thursday, the 28th of October, we have Designing Luminaires for End of Life, which looks at how we can create products that are easier to remanufacture and reuse. So all of that is at ricolite.co.uk. So please check that out. And I recommend those earlier sessions. We had some great speakers and very interesting debates. Today's session is being recorded, and it will in due course appear on the Ricolite website, so you can listen again to today at your leisure. It'll go up in maybe a couple of days. The webinar today will be an hour and a half. We'll finish at 12:30 p.m. Now, please put your questions in the questions box and chat in the chat box. And the reason I say this is because I'm only going to be looking at the questions during the event. My colleague Suzanne is taking care of the chat. So if you have any technical or sort of other queries, put them in there and Suzanne will do this. Now, I usually start these webinars with some news of sustainable and circular light, news from industry exception. And the big development this month is, of course, that the eco-design and labelling legislation became enforceable in the EU and effectively in the UK as well. Now, these regulations were published back in 2019 and revised in February earlier this year. They bring major changes for producers and end users of lighting products. The famous energy label has been rescaled, not before time, say its critics, and this is for light sources only, and they've got a new A to G scale. Additionally, the eco-design regulations contain circular economy requirements on the removability and replaceability of light sources and control gear, and that was the subject of one of our webinars earlier this year. Product designers too must also change the way that they create luminaires. They have to comply with a whole range of new quality measures related to things such as flicker and stroboscopic effects. In product news this month, Signify has become the first major company to introduce an A-class LED lamp, which gets an A rating under the new energy labeling scale. Now, to get an A rating, you need an efficacy of 210 lumens per watt, which is pretty impressive for a mainstream consumer product. The Philips branded lamps cost €10 and have a stated 50,000 hour life, which is 3 hours a day, works out at an amazing half a century. British manufacturer Thorlux has introduced an acoustic panel, one of these acoustic panel luminaires for schools and other applications like that, which has a sound absorbing body manufactured from 65% recycled PET, which is over 47 recycled plastic bottles used in every baffle. And as you can see, they're making a pretty big marketing play of the environmental credentials. And again, it's got a super long rated life of 100,000 hours. Schrader has, meanwhile, has launched the Circle Light label for its luminaires. This mark acts as an indicator to customers that the products are optimized for circular economy through 12 objective criteria that the company has drawn up. For instance, parts would be standardized and components and materials can be easily separated out at the end of life. And finally, Floss, the famous Italian designer lighting brand and the first stand we all head to at Frankfurt, has announced that it has achieved carbon neutrality. It has reduced its CO2 emissions and offset the remainder by purchasing carbon credits. So that's the sustainable lighting news from around the industry. Now on to the matter at hand today, and we're going to kick off with a deep dive into TM66 with Bob and Kristina. Over to you guys.
Good morning. If we can have our first slide, please. Thanks very much.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Ray, for that. And thank you to Rico Light for having us this morning. My name is Kristina, Allison.
Next slide, please. Suzanne? Could we have our next slide, please, Suzanne? Right. My apologies. Sorry.
Hi, Bob. Have you got the slides there?
Yeah, sorry. Can you just step back a slide to apologize? Sorry. Right.
Yeah.
Lighting's deliverables in the circular economy. In order to achieve net zero, we need to achieve the circular economy. And that's what Kristina and I have been working on today.
A CIBSE technical memorandum can be thought of as a fact file that explains a new technology or offers a new view on an established system in a short and straightforward way. Our new technology is the need to design products and new ecosystems of circular economy supporting systems and services. In this, we added a strong element of inspiration, the sustainable business case for why you should go circular. This became CIBSE Technical Memorandum TM66. In developing
Kristina, would you like to turn your video on? We can't see you talking. Super.
Sorry. In developing TM66, we soon saw the need for a checklist to deliver the detailed advice on how you implement it, but it grew into a metric, CIAM, the Circular Economy Assessment Method.
Next slide, please. In order to deliver sustainability, we need to recognize complexity. We need to manage that complexity, prioritize, provide enabling tools. We need to talk to all sectors of lighting, very much what we're talking about today. For each of those sectors, we need to explain why circular economy is important, and we need to tell them how to deliver it. For that, we need to provide next steps, avoid greenwash, and provide a simple metric. Next slide, please. Circular economy is all about design, not just product design, but it's also design of ecosystems, the support systems to support and enable it. So in working on TM66 and CM, we used design thinking. Empathy. We listened to many sectors of the lighting industry to learn about their knowledge, their challenges, their objectives. Define. We researched what the circular economy really is and what it really needs to be. And in doing that, we also worked with Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Ideate. We searched for the best ways to explain what the organization's drivers and challenges were. And that drove the change from a simple checklist to a full metric. Prototype. We produced draft versions of both TM66 and CM, and we consulted widely. And for example, people involved today were hugely helpful in that process. Test. We continued to consult and to beta test CM. Rollout. For early adopters, it's going to be voluntary. We then incorporate feedback and lessons learned into future versions. Certify. The end objective is to build an accreditation program, complete with product registration and surveillance. We've got twin models for this, both in the LIA QA member surveillance program and the CIBSE certification program. This ensures it works. Next slide, please.
To successfully embody circular economy in our day-to-day jobs, be they manufacturing, design, or as commissioning clients, we need the information to make decisions. So CIBSE Technical Memorandum 66 is a book of words. It provides a background to the circular economy, it explains the basic principles, and sets out the drivers and barriers to its adoption.
In its 47 pages and 16,500 odd words, we explain, what circular economy is. We encourage what circular economy is. We do that business case, sector by sector. We give case studies. We do a synopsis of the legislation, and we include FAQs about why we chose some of the metrics and how to use it. Next slide, please.
It includes drivers and barriers, industry-wide and sector by sector, practicalities, safety, warranties and localism, case studies and best practice guidance available now.
Next slide, please. Thank you. It's important to reinforce that this work could only have been effective if we engaged across the industry. And the document's only as good as it is through the incredible help and the passionate help that we received from so many people. We spoke to a senior product designer, major end user, 4 lighting design practices and 6 manufacturers, as well as learning from Ellen MacArthur and lots of documents from the European Union and gov.uk. Next slide, please.
By working both with specifiers and manufacturers, we have deliberately thought in terms of market economics to stimulate both demand pull and supply push of circular economy enabled products. By using the CM tool, our circular economy assessment method, we can drill right down to the nuts and bolts and give both specifiers and manufacturers a shared low-cost metric to use with an easy route in. We have already bridged the gap between specifiers and manufacturers.
Next slide, please.
The first tool is the Circular Economy Assessment Method for Manufacturing, CM Make, which allows manufacturers, or keen specifiers if they so wish, to assess the performance of their luminaire and its supporting ecosystems in terms of its circular economy performance.
The full-on CM Make is most probably too in-depth for a specifier to use every time they want to choose between the luminaires. So in the transition period, or when manufacturers have yet to fully complete CM Make, we then came up with a short form, CM design. It's a specifier support tool. Think of it almost like as a triage tool, the most important questions to ask a manufacturer.
So next up will be CM project. This evaluates how circular economy is enabled post-construction. After all, if a circular economy capable luminaire is specified, procured and installed, but then nobody manages these assets, their circularity has all been for nothing. We're suggesting that the building's operations and maintenance, the O&M manuals, become renamed as operations and value maintenance manuals. The digital thread of building information modeling, also known as BIM, and the Internet of Things are increasingly making this achievable.
And I think, Mark, we're going to really need your help on that next phase.
Yes. We had many discussions on benchmarking during the development of CM, but we now think a more positive view from a 0 to a +4 rating is the right way to go. On our assessment method, a 0 rating of a product or feature is the status quo. That's how a typical manufacturer supplies and supports a luminaire in 2021. It's our base position. This is a luminaire with no special design features or supporting services that are needed to deliver the circular economy. We then allow the manufacturer to score their product considering not just the circular economy features, but the strength of evidence supporting their claim. So 0 equals no evidence, and +1 indicates some positive evidence, +2 indicates more positive evidence, and +3 excellent, both in features and the amount of evidence supporting the claim. And finally, we have +4 outstanding. This realistically is quite a long way down the road. It's where products are not merely circular, causing little or no impact, but truly regenerative and restoring natural systems.
Next slide, please.
CM Make is split into 4 main sections covering products, design, manufacturing, materials, and their ecosystems. Each of these is split into a series of weighted criteria. For example, under the product design section, we assess 31 criteria across 4 areas. These areas include reusability, upgradability, burning hours monitoring, repairability, durability, material usage and sourcing, harmonization of component usage, fixings, design for remanufacturer, resilience to digital control obsolescence, proof of circular economy claims, and competence and buy-in.
When we zoom in and look in detail at the product design tab, you can see we've used a simple checkbox method of filling it out. But we had to be thoughtful in our approach. It's much easier, perhaps, to design a track spot to deliver circular economy than a highly ingress protected, highly sealed floodlight. So we've incorporated multi-criteria decision analysis, which weights the results to avoid unintended consequences. Next slide, please. And another challenge is that some parts of the circular economy just have not been designed yet, principally the ecosystems that will support it. We all know about logistics, how to get our shiny new 600 by 600 LED panel from Guangzhou to Glasgow via ship, truck, and installer. But have you heard about reverse logistics, where they go back and pick it up again, repair, reuse, or component recovery? How do we do that? So under the manufacturing tab, we look at localism, supply chains, in-house closed loop manufacturing, and corporate and social responsibility, labor and skills.
The zoom shows how you can select the distance of your manufacturing site, the supply chain, and very importantly, the remanufacturing locations of your project sites across the world.
Next slide, please. Sorry, stay there. My apologies. 2 of the challenges facing us are greenwash and lack of information. Ask any sales representative on the recyclability of their luminaire, and you may get a nervous pause, followed by a relieved smile when they say it's made of aluminium. And aluminium's recycled, isn't it? But we say, is your aluminium recycled? How much? The percentage. What do you do with end of life? Does that become straight into another luminaire, or is it just going to be simply put through the shredder? We carefully evaluated our metrics In the end, we chose weight rather than quantity, volume, or value because it made sense and it was measurable. As you can see, we look at the usability and recyclability of materials. Using innovative, natural, or bioplastic materials, on the face of it, seems to be a win for the environment. But we only grant more points if they don't create mixed waste streams at the very end of product life. Sorry, Suzanne, can you jump to the next slide?
The ecosystems look at things like reusable packaging, on-site remanufacturing services, and the long-term services that will allow a luminaire to be repurposed.
Next slide, please. Warranties may have to change. So might labeling. Lots of features might change. Systems, services, and platforms have yet to be designed or come into effect. Our assessment method is just the first version. It will grow and change as we learn and as the market grows and changes. Thus, the ecosystem tab looks at how to support a luminaire, I should say, in its second life. If you go to a used car dealership, you can see from the windscreen sticker what the mileage is, whether it's been fully serviced. From the back of the car, you can find out the engine size maybe and get an idea of its performance and fuel consumption. How do we do that in luminaires? How do we know how long they've been burning, what their photometry is, and whether the warranty will support them in a second or third use? Next slide, please.
The ecosystem looks at things like reusable packaging, on-site remanufacturing services, and the long-term systems that will allow a luminaire to be repurposed.
Next slide, please. Then in the fifth tab, we bring all the results together in a summary and simply explain what the end number means. We show people tab by tab and then on an overall score accompanied by an easy to use red to green system, an explanation of whether their score is good enough. What were we thinking about when we wanted to create a memorable, easy to understand metric that can represent large amounts of complex data? Euro NCAP. Euro NCAP is a voluntary scheme. Behind the scenes, it covers a huge amount of technical data and it's European-wide. But would you now go out and buy a Euro NCAP 2-star car when you can buy a 5-star one? So it's the voluntary scheme that is now, for manufacturers, a requirement.
If our work is proven to be effective, it will both inform, enable, and motivate manufacturers to go from zero to hero with product features and eventually full product ranges and supporting ecosystems that achieve CM outstanding ratings of CM4. For designers, the goal is to create a recognized specification metric for those including circular economy performance with their design product selection and in their decision process.
We want it to be relatively low cost and voluntary at first, so that we do not place barriers in front of manufacturers. Later, some costs can be levied just to support certification, accreditation, and market surveillance. We recognize the full CM make could not be used day to day by a specifier, so we created CM Design, a simple single tab version. Pareto analysis, the 80-20 rule, suggests that 80% of a product's criteria, 80% of a product's circular economy performance will boil down to 20% of the assessment criteria. We didn't quite boil down 66 down to just 13 because we reckon that 21 criteria were most important. And that single tab does cover product design and manufacturing and materials and ecosystems. Next slide, please.
But the fundamental questions are the same in both CM Make and CM Design. It looks and works in the same way and gives the same basic results. The full CM Make version is still of huge utility too, though, because it informs manufacturers of the depth of work that is needed to truly deliver a circular economy.
Beta testing is super important to make this work and for us to learn and to improve it. So currently we've engaged with 3 manufacturers who are doing beta testing, actively using this, and their initial feedback's been pretty positive. We have already bridged the gap between manufacturers and specifiers. Many lighting designers and engineering bureau have really helped us, and thank you for their brilliant support. But what is also brilliant is that many others have also now started asking, where do they get this document from? Is it quite ready? Well, the answer is a couple of weeks, and asking to use our work.
We've also engaged widely with webinars like this one, reaching out to manufacturers, specifiers, and industry bodies as well. In not much more than a year from the start of our work, we're delighted to report, as Ray pointed out earlier, and we are gaining traction with this work. We have engaged not just in the UK, but internationally via the IES to North America, the Middle East, and Australasia. 2 months ago, this is the part that Ray pointed out, we were delighted for TM66 and CM to win both green for sustainability and platinum for initiative likely to drive change at the Build Back Better Awards. But telling people off tends not to work when we're talking about sustainability.
You have to make people want to be green. We offer these as methods of showing people how to do better. We now need more designers, more manufacturers, more organizations, such as many listening on this call, on this webinar, to join what we're doing. If CM is adopted, maybe in improved form, maybe across the EU, manufacturers and specifiers have one simple unified metric. It's cheaper and it's more powerful. It doesn't need much imagination, for example, to think of CM scores included in your Dilux or Relux output.
So thank you very much, everyone, and we hope you will join us on our journey.
Thank you very much, and we'd like to take your questions. Right.
Bob, we'll take questions at the end after the full presentations, but thank you guys, and we'll move on to Mark.
Good morning, everyone. First slide, please.
Bob, would you like to turn your video off now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Could you have the first slide? Thank you very much. No, back up one. That's one. Right. So, yeah, towards the end of 2019, I received some Christmas cards from manufacturers who'd been telling us all that they were doing in terms of the circular economy, which was a welcome surprise because I'd been having dialogue with clients for some years about embodied carbon and circular economy, and it really wasn't gaining much traction. So I thought, right, 2020, that's going to be the year that we actually look at what that means to us. And initially, I thought it was very much about product. We were very lucky to get commissioned for a big project, which unfortunately has now gone on stop, but where CE or circular economy was right at the center of the brief. And we quickly realized that it wasn't all about product. It is actually how the whole project cycle is constructed will determine effectively whether or not products that are designed and capable of being CE or reused are. Next slide, please. So we use this simple criteria to examine each bit of that circle in the coming slides, with avoid being where we as designers can make the biggest impact, and then going down, reduce, reuse, hopefully not having to recycle, and definitely trying to avoid recover, treat, and dispose. And the first thing in our toolbook is daylight. If we're using daylight well, then it means that in some instances, we don't need to put product in those areas. Now, the client really needs to buy into this, but it's an easy it's an easy story to say because of the staff benefits, the energy sterilization, but it does mean that it actually has to impact the architectural brief, and therefore the client really needs to buy into the benefits and the way in which they're planning their projects. Next slide, please. And the new daylight metrics help us now to harmonize electrical lighting design with daylight design to give clients that surety that what we're proposing when we're leaving elements of a design out is the right thing to do. Next slide. Another way we can help reduce the amount of product or stuff that we bring into our projects is what I call code intelligence. Rather than a blanket application of one number, it's actually analyzing where specific tasks are happening and put the appropriate amount of light to those. We find that actually typically in an office situation, for instance, desks only cover about 30% of the floor area. So don't light all the floor to 400 lux. And this we found actually can reduce energy and product coming in by as much as 50%. Next slide, please. Control. This is another very important reduce tactic, and it's about having the right light at the right time. But we do need, it's often much more difficult to apply than it should be. The good news is that new systems are coming on board, particularly with some of the mesh systems, that it's becoming more intuitive to the clients, and hopefully will gain better and more thorough adoption. But these new systems also will have great potential benefits to clients by giving data about not only the lighting, but the client's estate as well, which will hopefully allow for greater harmonization and also staff engagement. The FM guys need to buy into it, and the contractors will need early training in the control systems so that they adopt them and deploy them. Okay, next. Supplier innovation is a really great way of reducing, and we're increasingly getting very enthusiastic and innovative contribution from the people that we work with and whose products we specify. And there's interestingly, the suppliers are actually driving the debate rather than following it. And with emerging legislation, it's hopefully going to make the quality manufacturers give them a competitive advantage. Next slide. Design can also help on the reuse journey by actually the kind of luminaires they have and by deaggregating them from the structure of the building. Task lighting is something that we've at BDP have promulgated for a long time, but sometimes it has to be recognized that clients aren't particularly enthusiastic about it or suspicious, particularly in the UK, perhaps less so in Europe. So clients need to buy into the aesthetic and the functionality to allow us to pursue this design strategy. And the FM guys need to feed into that specification so that the products specified are sufficiently robust for their purposes. And the contractors need to commit to that specification. Next slide. There's a trend towards greater offsite manufacture, and for pods, for instance, to be coming into buildings. And that gives us an opportunity to integrate lighting into those. And therefore, when the furniture moves, the light moves with it, and it gives an opportunity to reuse light more effectively as well, mainly because you've deaggregated from the building. Next slide, please. And this whole principle of demountable design is very important. We feel that if you can put in flexible infrastructure that allows you to put toolkits of light into the space and then reconfigure them when that space has a changing functional brief, it really facilitates the reuse of equipment, or even if you've got a large estate, to move it from one building to another. Next slide, please. And then we need to specify manufacturers' equipment that allows them to be reused. I won't repeat the messages that Bob and Kristina were talking about earlier, but the modularity and fixing methods are really crucial. And I'm convinced that TM66 will really help us specify effectively CE products. Next slide, please. But as Kristina was alluding to, it's all very well if you've got a design that uses excellent products, but unless a contractor actually buys into that specification and the client actually demands that it's a sufficient priority in their concerns, that they will ensure that the contractors do, the chain is broken, and suddenly sustainable products are not sustainable in actual use. Next, please. And in actual building use, it's really, really important that we've convinced the facilities management team, the operational teams, of what they have. And one of the really crucial parts of this bit of the chain is actually those guys knowing what they have, because unless you know what you have, you can't feasibly reuse it or recycle it or return back to manufacturers if they have that kind of relationship with the product. But there's technology that's going to help us here, and certainly again with products that are, for instance, Bluetooth enabled, it will increasingly allow us to do product passports, and light fittings can possibly identify themselves within the building and create automatic audits, which hopefully should make it easier for facility managers to maintain the CE credentials of their installation. Next slide, please. So, end of life, well, it doesn't need to be, but the reason I put this slide in is that if a car, actually, you know how far it's traveled, and you know the condition that it's had because it's got a service history, then it has a value. And our light fittings need to do the same thing. We need to know how long they burnt for. We need to know something about their condition that actually then prefers a value to them, which also then allows them to be reused. But also this second-hand market is diversified across the country. It's local, and it's got local practitioners working to standards that are well known, for instance, the MOT system, that again allows purchasers of second-hand equipment a certain level of assurance as to the quality of what they're buying. And those are the essential elements that are going to be needed to make this dream a reality. Okay, next slide. So we come back to the brief. We started with a client giving us a brief that actually circular economy was vital to what they wanted to achieve. We worked with our design partners to make sure that the strategies that I highlighted were applied and coordinated, not only technically, but aesthetically. What then is needed is a contractor that's actually going to implement the specification. And this, I think, is where TM66 will be so important and effective, because it actually allows you to build circular economy factors into equal and approved evaluations. And then we need to work very much on the handover of those projects to the operators, so that there is documentation and information and data that allows those products that have the capacity to be reused to be reused. And when we come back to the brief, one of the tests we have gently with our clients is asking them, if we could get you safe, good value, second-hand products into this project, is that an idea that you would possibly consider? And if the answer is yes, then we have the potential for a CE project. The answer is no, then there is no real point in pursuing it massively, actively, because it will fall down, the chain will break. So the key takeaways: circular economy is necessarily collaborative. We need designers on their own will not really have the necessary impact. Equal and approved is the enemy of CE, and therefore we need to really carefully look at value engineering and contract models. And this really involves active engagement by our clients. It needs governance through that life cycle. Again, clients really need to buy this and to make sure that the contract models are set up correctly and that the way in which projects are handed over to their own operational organizations are effective and governed. And it requires innovation in the supply chain. I said when I wrote this that standards were not yet available, but they're coming, and they're coming very quickly. Next slide. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. So my name's Sophie, and I'm here to talk to you all about the Green Light Alliance. If you just go first slide, please, Suzanne. Thank you. So our vision is to light up the world without depleting its resources. So we're here today to look at the specifiers role in particular in the circular economy, and that is one of the many aspects that the Green Light Alliance are looking to tackle. And I'd like to give a quick overview of who we are and what our goals are. So let's start at the beginning. Now, the linear economy is the current economy that we are working to. The economy has become so large that it is now extracting more raw materials than what is sustainable, and we're dumping more waste than we can process. So as we are all very familiar with, we are looking now to move towards a circular economy that is one of reduce, reuse, recycle, and maintain. Now, next slide, please, Suzanne. The problem at hand specifically is that, first of all, electronic waste, or WEEE, is the world's fastest growing waste stream. Therefore, our current linear economy is fast becoming obsolete because, as previously mentioned, the growth is exceeding our abilities to process the waste. Next of all, recycling and sustainability are very broad terms. Recycling in itself is not a sufficient enough solution, and a more drastic change to a circular economy is needed. Currently, 3% of all electronic waste placed on the market is recycled annually. A complete change to the supply and specification system is needed. It's a complex change, and it's quite an overwhelming endeavour. And then lastly, lots of people are currently working on this, as you can see today, and which is amazing to see, but we've identified that there needs to be a greater collaboration across the industry and more of a holistic systemic change. So we discovered that there is need for consistent approaches in industry and a way to unify all the amazing efforts currently underway within that industry, which is where we come in. So our mission statement: the Green Light Alliance will work together to help everyone in the lighting sector understand their role in adopting and promoting the circular economy. We'll work towards industry standards that are universally recognised, trusted and sought after, and we'll also provide a hub for discussion and education in circular lighting design and the circular economy. So, who are we? We are a community of aligned individuals, businesses and institutions within the lighting profession sharing a common goal of applying sustainable and circular economy principles to the lighting industry. So essentially, we are you. We're the lighting industry. My fellow panelist, Mark, here is a founding member as well. we represent design and specifier, manufacturer, installation, maintenance and upgrade, owner and surveillance, and legislator and educator. So we hope to represent all stages of the process. If you could just go back one, sorry, Suzanne, thank you. So it is in fact vital to our success that we have members of all these groups represented at all stages of the project, as this is what will allow projects to truly become circular. And the ultimate goal is to take this research and figure out how to implement it into our own practices in a way that benefits all stakeholders within the process. And we want to ensure that all groups, government bodies, and standards within the industry are communicating and aligning their objectives in a cohesive way when it comes to sustainability. We essentially want to support one another in this end goal of furthering sustainability within the industry. So here you can see we're in the process of pooling information and seeing what useful task forces or work groups that we can pull together within the GLA. We've got a few different topics we're researching. We've been identifying where the collaboration needs to come from in order to appropriately address the topics. One of them involving us, the specifier, is to work with clients and architects to write sustainable goals into our design briefs. And it's also worth noting that this is not a comprehensive list, and we welcome any suggestions from anyone who wants to get involved. Next slide, please. Thank you. So speaking of getting involved, in order to sort of be as inclusive as possible, we have identified 2 streams of getting involved. The first one, you can be an ally. This is where you take a fairly passive role in which you might follow us on social media, subscribe to the newsletter, and then feel free to send us any information or research that you think might be of assistance to the initiative. And if you wish to be more involved, you can take on more of a contributing member role in which you are an active voice. You can join task forces or work groups. You can actively educate yourself and others on the circular economy. Really, we're open to suggestions and discussions. As we said, we are you, and we want this initiative to exist and grow for as long as it holds a useful role within the industry. And as you can see here, this is a non-exhaustive list of the collaborators we have thus far, of which we are very thankful, and it's really, really wonderful to see the uptake this has had already in the industry. So it's worth mentioning also our ethos. So we are still finding our way. We're independent, we're voluntary, and we're growing organically. As more people get involved, it will naturally find its form, and we really embrace this approach. We want this to be an international collaboration. It is fairly UK heavy at the moment. I know it does seem that way, and it is true. But we have a couple of American supporters, or people in America, who are growing this within the American industry, which is really amazing to see, and we hope to keep expanding. We're relaxed and informal. While we have some firm goals, i.e. the checklist, there's a lot of opportunity to go in different directions, and we welcome any new ideas for work groups or otherwise. And be positive and helpful. This should really be an enjoyable experience for everyone. We want to promote and support sustainable efforts where possible, rather than shoot anything down. And at the end of the day, we are just a bunch of people who really care about the future of the planet and everyone on it. So we welcome you to join us, follow us on social media, go and subscribe to our newsletter on the website. And if you want to get in contact directly, the info@greenlightalliance.com email is where you can best reach us on. Thanks. And next, I believe we have Bruce joining us.
Guys, hopefully the sound is okay.
Yeah. Plow on, Bruce. Yeah, we had some technical issues earlier, in case somebody's wondering, but hopefully your audio is okay now, Bruce.
Fantastic. Firstly, Ray, thanks very much for having us, and really grateful to be part of the discussion. Our chat will be short and sweet, max 4 to 5 minutes, and then it's back to Ray to take the reins. My name is Bruce Will. I'm co-owner of a lighting studio called Lighting Design Studio. Our ethos as a practice is living light, which is being passionate about what we do, but doing it in a sustainable way. So we're really looking at what can we actually do now with our project. So we came up with 6 steps which help us when we're working on our project, sort of identify ways that we can work with the circular economy. So first is never knowingly overlight. This reduces the number of fittings in circulation, reduces the overall energy consumption. We use the best kit available, ensuring we reduce the quantity of replacements in the project's lifetime. We're committed to the responsible supply of materials, helping reduce the carbon footprint of the kit being specified, and it ensures that we work with suppliers who fit with our ethos. We aim to reuse fittings where feasible, and we're involved in refurbs to ensure the fittings are recycled properly. And importantly, we carbon offset the estimated energy of the lighting of our projects. So at the end of our schemes, we will tabulate the total energy used, and then we will offset the tons of carbon. And it's just something that we do as a nice thing at the end of our projects. And we contribute 1% of our profits to environmental charities. So all good things. So next slide. But we have come up with a few conflicts, I suppose, is the term. So I just wanted to very, very briefly go through a couple of things that we've sort of found in trying to implement some of these ideas into schemes. I mean, the main thing is, the number one thing for us is just reducing. And if we look at a residential scheme, so next slide, if we took the reduce ethos to its bare bones, we'd be left with a single bare light bulb in a scheme. So, and I'm not too sure how happy the client's going to be or impressed with that. Next slide. So it's really being conscious of the detailing, minimizing where you might use these details. There is a conflict between reducing enough without reducing the impact. And it has been a real challenge, and it's kind of a bit of soul searching, I suppose, in a way, for the way we approach our projects, and where we would have put a lot of these kind of cool details in, we have to pare it back quite a bit. Care homes is an interesting one. So, there's a lot of talk in the industry with circadian lighting, it's all the rage, and it has been shown to help with degenerative diseases, but it does come at a greater energy expense to conventional lighting. So, there's an argument for using it in the one hand, whereas the circular economy, probably is a bit energy intense. There's also the balance between lighting comfort from an aesthetic perspective. If we take the example of a hallway, you could easily light it with just downlights, but it gives it a really institutional feel. So we'd add wall lights, which would make it a much more homey environment, but which takes the precedent, creating a more pleasantly lit environment or using less kit to help protect the wider environment. Again, we're not sure, but these are the kind of problems and issues that we've been coming up against. So the biggest bugbear, I suppose, is the next slide. As mentioned, we've been carbon offsetting our projects, but not for long, only the last year and a half or so. By far the worst offender is retail. So, within our design team, we'll argue internally to save, I don't know, 20 or 30 points on, a residential scheme, or maybe similar in a care home. But the biggest offender is retail. The lux levels are monstrous. The amount of time the lights are left on is long. So the energy used for these schemes is astronomical. And we've seen that because we've had to offset the carbon of these projects. It's tons of carbon per year. So my view is that if we as an industry are serious about reducing our carbon impact and implementing positive change, we really need to talk about retail and how we reduce the lighting use within this sector. There's many, many ways that this could be done. And I think we're just at that sort of starting point of this conversation. So the silver linings that we've found with implementing these within our schemes, the carbon offsetting is really simple to do. It gets you thinking from the offset how how much lighting you're using. And because we're personally paying for this, we have a bill for this at the end. So we don't charge the clients for this. So it's in our incentive to use a lot less. So it incentivizes us, but also it's a really nice thing to give to your clients at the end. And as we all know, a happy client leads to more work. Some of the interesting tech that I think sort of gets forgotten about, I mean, Mark briefly mentioned it, the controls aspect. Bluetooth lighting is everywhere. So as well as the lighting, if you want to reduce the impact of your schemes, you've really got to be thinking quite holistically, and that would include the controls and the cabling. Bluetooth, potentially you can have all the control in your fitting, and then you can have a wireless keypad, which doesn't even require any energy. So you're reducing the overall cabling, which again is going to have a positive overall impact on the scheme. When we have another positive thing we've come up with is the reusing of stuff. So we're working on a Holland Park project. These are billionaires. They don't need to reuse stuff, but having that conversation with them, they start to think about it. And these are the kind of people that probably have a much, much greater influence in terms of their ability to enact these sort of changes. They might be CEOs of megacorps. So having these conversations at our level can have a really positive impact at a much higher level, but also from a business perspective. So if you are a smaller practice like ourselves, it's given us another arm to our business. So we're able to charge our clients a fee for investigating what lighting we can reuse and just having that conversation and seeing how we go about upgrading or reusing the existing kit. The final thing with recycling, just again, having that conversation with the contractor, getting them in touch with Ricolite, puts you in a really positive, positive view with the contractor, because you're helping them deal with waste, which for everyone is a massive problem. So it's a great thing to be part of. So conclusion, I've talked a bit about Lighting Design Studio and what we're doing to be more sustainable. Some of the issues that have cropped up and some of the benefits. Thank you. Over to you, Ray.
Great, thank you, Bruce. We got there with the audio in the end. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was great. If I could invite all the panelists to turn your video on, that'd be great. And Nigel, if I can invite you at this point, where are you? I've lost. There you are. It must be interesting for me. Just a couple of two things. First of all, your thoughts on what you've heard so far in terms of the specifiers, bringing their vision to this. And secondly, it must be quite interesting for you to hear people talking about reuse. You run an organization that was set up for recycling, and here is everybody looking at recycling as something we want to avoid. And we're actually, for the first time, I think, seriously banding the word reuse and remanufacture around.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ray. And thank you to all our speakers as well. It's been really encouraging to hear some of the issues that have been talked about today. I mean, obviously, legislation is one of the big drivers of change in our industry, but specifiers and customers are absolutely as well. And I think hearing the sort of the way in which sustainability is really being championed is just fantastic. It's marvelous, because it's that drive which will help manufacturers have the space to respond positively, which will start to drive the change that we need within the industry. So, in answer to your first question, I'm just thrilled to have heard what I've heard this morning. Really heartened. On your second point, Ray, absolutely. I mean, we were set up as a recycling organisation, and let's face it, recycling is not the best solution. It's actually right low in the waste hierarchy, and actually reducing the amount that is used in the first place is more important. If you can't do that, then try to reuse it. And certainly we are looking to evolve and adapt and change our organization so that we're moving away from or reducing the amount that we recycle and facilitating and encouraging more reuse. And in fact, our next webinar, I think you'll probably talk about that, Ray, is very much looking at that. So how can we and others help our industry to look at reuse and the ways in which we can move from all product being new to at least some being reused, together with all the issues like warranty, etc., and customer acceptance, which are so important as well. It's all part of a circular economy, and it's a vital step that we need to take if we're all going to help tackle the climate crisis, which is facing us all.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, right. We'll take some specific questions, just some specific questions on TM66. So Bob and Kristina, if you could unmute yourselves. First of all, Barry Chutter, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, is asking, can you manufacturers access the beta version? Kevin Shaw is asking, do we need another bit of CEAM to allow us to assess an existing luminaire for reuse? And finally, Kevin is also asking, do we think Brexit will harm the adoption of CEAM across the EU? So that's, he's talking about getting traction for CEAM and for TM66 outside the UK and globally. So
the first part of that question, I'd say if he wants to be part of the beta testing, then get in touch. Yeah, I don't know if you can get in touch with myself or Bob individually, or definitely via Julia at the SLL. Yeah, that's how we start with that bit. But we definitely would like you to be on board with part of the beta testing, please.
And what about assessing a existing luminaire, a CM system for existing a luminaire that's already in a ceiling?
Oh, I mean, I suppose in some ways you could, I mean, Bob, you can jump in and help me with this one if you like, but I mean, I think going through the questions to begin with would be a good start to see where you are. There may be additional questions that need asking.
Kristina is absolutely right. You can use this as a checklist to understand what you need to do. Let's face it, people have been actually doing that for a number of years. One of our beta testers is already going into office buildings, you know, looking at the existing, say, fluorescent luminaires, working out whether they can keep, you know, the bodies, what they can reuse, turn it into LED. We've got to think about standards, we've got to think about quality, got to think about photometry, but they're doing that. Another team member of TM66, they're actively looking after a whole raft of projects done by a previous manufacturer. They've got the spare parts, they're going in there, they're replacing it. You can do it. In terms of Brexit, well, last week we were presenting to Lighting Europe. So there's a strong possibility this could get adopted European-wide. Now, let's be clear here. We're not here to try to promote TM66. We're here to promote the planet. So to talk about Deng Xiaoping, it doesn't matter whether the cat is black or white, providing it catches mice. So providing the end effect is that we have a more sustainable economy, that gets us there. If somebody else wants to pick up on our work and make it better, cool. If they've got some great work and they want to feed it in, cool. We've presented to the US via IES, and that went out to, we have people there from Australia and New Zealand on the call. We're not aware of anybody who's quite as advanced as us. So they were super interested. You know, the more people who get on board, the easier, the cheaper it becomes.
That's it, isn't it? So the more people that can join the beta testing, the better. But I think what we're most excited about is how much conversation we've started. This debate's got bigger, and I'm really excited about all of that, to be honest.
Okay, well, presumably you want, like, you know, if I see a car, an advertisement for a car, it's got the NCAP rating on it, and presumably you want to get to that position with a luminaire advertisement.
Absolutely. You know, can you imagine you're doing your Dalux or your Relux or whatever, you've got your list, you know, your average rating for a scheme. You know, Mark's got his hand up. You know, he'll be looking at how this project works. But we need a simple to understand metric, and you know, and as Mark was also saying, that if it's going to be equal or approved, we need something that people can trust, something that's been thought through, something which actually covers off the main issues.
Yeah, Mark.
I think one of the main opportunities for international adoption, and actually adoption widely, is to penetrate the other sustainability metrics. If you got a BREEAM point for a certain CM rating, or WELL is probably the most influential one. So we're beginning to have dialogues with those kinds of organisations, and I think we need to.
Yeah, that'd be amazing, wouldn't it? I mean, there's no accident that CM rhymes with BREEAM in some ways.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, that'd be amazing, wouldn't it? If later on that, you know, a CM rating credit was allowed in BREEAM. I mean, that would be a fantastic direction for this to go into.
What we try to avoid is you get extra points for putting some bike racks out in front of an unsustainable building, or you get extra points for putting a wood pellet boiler in a building that you're never going to be able to get the truck to for the wood pellets. We're going to try to, you know, we need to avoid the point where, providing you've just got, you know, so many luminaire lumens per circuit watts, that's enough, you know. So we're trying to avoid simplistic single in metrics which don't actually deliver sustainability.
Nigel?
Yes, I was going to ask Kristina and Bob, how do manufacturers engage with this? Do they submit their fittings to the SLL to apply to apply TM66 and CM, or do they do it themselves? You know, and so is there a sort of an independent third party doing the checking?
Well, currently they're doing it themselves. It's voluntary, as Bob was suggesting with the Euro NCAP side of things. And as you said, it's Bob and I at the moment. It's only us two. I suppose further on down the line, we'd like to think that there's a business in this somehow. Bob, do you want to jump in and see?
It's not being done for a business. Short term, okay, I think TM66 as a document, it should be out in 2 or 3 weeks. It's going to be coming out as an available spreadsheet. The reason why we're keeping it as a spreadsheet, because we know we're going to have to change it quite rapidly. After that, it's going to be probably a web-based tool so people can access it quickly. We don't want to put barriers to entry. You know, manufacturers have got enough on their plate at the moment with Brexit, with COVID, with everything. With the fact that it costs 14,000 euros to get a container in from the Far East these days. They've got enough to deal with. The last thing they need is overly complex, very expensive systems stuck in front of them. But you'd be amazed how many people are talking sustainability. And the intention is not to make a sort of profitable business out of this. The point of this is that at some point we have a system with just enough to certify it. So that anybody, so if Bruce comes on and he's looking at that star rating, he knows it's true, rather than, you know, we all know that some people's photometry is brilliant. We all know that other people's photometry is less brilliant. You know, so, you know, he needs to be able to trust it. So there's a certain amount of certification that at some point somebody will dip in, pull out a random, you know, percentage and go, let's have a look at your evidence. Was that wishful thinking? Or have you got something to back it up?
Yeah, when I said earlier that it would be a business around it, I just mean that we can't do this on our own forever.
No, it's fair enough. Couple of questions. Dorothy Basher-Horn, who's one of the judges in the Build Back Better Awards, she's a lighting designer, and she says, how do you convince clients to go with products that are circular economy when the products may be on a longer lead time or may delay the project? And a similar related question is from Chris Mahan of the Ridley Group, saying, you know, essentially, how do we prevent, you know, circular economy luminaires from becoming a victim of dreaded value engineering and getting value engineered out of a project? How do we hold a spec on it?
If I can tackle Dorrit's business crackers, I tend to actually go the total opposite. So if you're now going to bring in a brand new fitting from wherever, you've got long lead times, etc., etc. So why would circular economy? Why would it increase your lead times? If you've already got a product you might want to be re-engineering, you've got the fundamentals there. You know, you can work on it. You're going to have to be working on it locally. You don't want to be shipping it across the world. So lead times are actually positive for circular economy.
Can I bring in a designer on this? What about Bruce? What's your view on this? Can you persuade a client to hang on if you know and hold that spec?
It's the same problem we all face of maintaining that quality on spec and getting anything value engineered. So I don't think it's whether it's circular engineered or the quality of the product, it's just maintaining that spec. So and that is our job to do, and we'd always ensure that happens.
Okay, sorry, your sound is playing up again, unfortunately. So there, Alexia Krikika, I think, hope I pronounced your name correctly, Alexia. Will second-hand lighting equipment be cheaper? Anybody?
Sorry, I'm doing a lot of talking, which I suppose I'm famous for, so I apologize for that. The whole point, and this will only work if we have a business case for everybody in the industry. If we just, as that slide both said, if we just tell everybody off, they're not going to do it. They have to have a business case. We were talking about, you know, we have this notional electrician that Kristina and I talk about, who goes in, you know, he's just going to rip stuff out the ceiling, throw it in the skip, not even put it in the wee recycling, because he wants to get the job done as quickly as possible. So he's interested in two things: how quickly he can do it and how much money he makes. If we can make certain there's business case for maintaining stuff, so at the end of the day, when he goes home, he has the same amount of money in his pocket, but there's less damage to the environment, that's where we need to get to. Nice. So we're not here necessarily to make it cheaper. It can be, because we've saved some resources. You didn't have to buy the new aluminium body. Here, the point is to be sustainable.
So we shouldn't assume that a remanufactured or reused luminaire is going to be any cheaper than a fresh one. Mark.
And it's just picking up on Bob's point, is that I think business models are being discovered, and there's driving some real innovation there. I think the price point is moot. I think some elements go up, but if you take on a project level, if you've reduced the amount of kit actually going into a project, you get a compensation. And on the project that we were doing last year, it looked as though it was pretty cost neutral, but it's very project specific, I think. And there are other companies that are beginning to really explore this question about warranty and how it's actually done, so that it's a purchasable. It's not a cottage industry. It's not something that is difficult to implement, but it's actually achievable. But it does require that innovation in business as well. But we've got to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Guy Kornetsky is asking, could we please talk about warranties for second-hand lighting fittings being reused? Is that needed to activate the market and encourage confidence? Will manufacturers offer it?
Well, again, just
Anyone?
speaking to what the point that I was saying then, is that I think you're going to get people that take equipment and then recertify it, because the manufacturers, it's unreasonable to expect them to certify a product and warrant a product where they haven't had any control. But there are models, again, that, you know, the slightly humorous slide of the second-hand car market. It's not Ford that offers you a 6-year warranty. It's a second-hand car dealer who will get, you know, a national test certification for that and give you certain basic information about the product that's being sold, and then you take a value decision on whether or not you want a brand new one or a second-hand one.
Would that be something like an extended pat testing type situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something like that. Bruce?
Yeah, does it sound okay? Any better?
No, not really. But so be brief.
I'll be very brief. I mean, we looked into almost a business model of taking existing lighting of a project and getting it refurbished. The problem is, for example, if you had 100 downloads, how would you then sell those on via a website? Say you needed 110, but you only had 100. You only had 100 of those specific. So I think there are probably business models out there who refurbish stuff and resell them, but I don't think they'd be cheaper. I think they'd actually be a lot more expensive, and that's whether you get people to buy into that. I don't know. I mean, it'd be worth a go, but the investment would be pretty heavy, I imagine, to do something like that.
Okay, Mark.
The other thing that this driver see is resource depletion, and that's going to drive up the cost of raw materials. So, and if it goes the way that some organisations are predicting, we just new light fittings, you're going to have to use recycled material because there will be no new material. So I think the cost dynamic is going to change, and it's going to tip in favour of reuse inevitably. We're just running out of copper, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Nigel?
Yes, just to explain what we're going to try to do, which will hopefully mean that sort of second-hand fittings shouldn't necessarily be more expensive. And where we identify used fittings that are being removed that we think are capable of reuse, we will make those available on a delivered free of charge basis to organizations that might be able to remanufacture them. So at least the starting point is just the additional effort to remanufacture them or replace some of the parts and to polish them up again. So at least the starting point is not cost.
That needs to be a huge industry, doesn't it? We need a huge remanufacturing sector eventually.
Indeed.
Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, it will create a huge sector. I think there's also another one. We need to understand durability. Whole point of circular economy is maintaining a product at its highest value for as long as possible. Now we get speed of change. No, COVID has shown that to us all, speed of change in offices. But luminaires need to be designed for a reasonable life. And if it's in use, fit for purpose and continuing to work, then great, because that means we don't have to go back with the white transit van to take it out and re-engineer it. So let's know if we could I would say this, wouldn't I, with LIAQA, but product quality and durability is super important.
Mm-hmm. Doreen Colling is saying, wouldn't it be easier, more feasible for the whole industry to make it into a use-orientated business so that the manufacturers take back their own luminaire once a project wants to change the lighting? Interesting comment. Right, Bruce, come in on that.
Yeah, I think the problem is getting that back in a good enough condition. Quite often when things go into the ceiling, they get wrecked coming down. So I guess it's down to the manufacturer to produce stuff that can be reused. It's a complete rethinking of how they sell a product. And then I suppose the other thing is plastering fittings. We've kind of stopped using them because there's a real difficulty in reusing that stuff.
Bruce, I'm going to stop you there because your sound is getting worse for some reason as we go along, as we go further. A specific question about TM66 from Saro Stachiotti. What is the difference between TM66 and EPD? Bob or Kristina, do you want to take that?
As opposed to environmental product declaration, we just wrote it to be very specific to lighting, because the whole topic, it's lighting is complicated. So we wrote it almost within we've got to be careful, as a COVID reference in a bubble of our industry. The intention is to roll it out to all building services. So we're kind of testing a process. Lighting tends to be quite innovative in these things. The other one, of course, depending on where you are on EPDs, how expensive it is going to be to achieve it. So we thought we'd write the most comprehensive version, get it out there, and get it in use.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Right, and Sophie and Mark.
Sophie had a hand up. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, Sophie. Yeah, we want to bring you in here.
I did before as a previous point, but it was more the fact that we also need to make sure that we are encouraging clients to take on buyback schemes or encourage them to reuse products. So it's well and good to say, how do we refurbish them? Where do we refurbish them? How does that work? We also need to make sure as specifiers that at the very beginning of everything, we are bringing in the client, we are selling it to them, we're making it sexy, we're making it cool. We need to sort of help bridge that gap and encourage the end use as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know you guys at Nulty do a fair bit of retail, so I'll be interested in your view on that. It really is an egregious sector, isn't it? Where energy is used, willfully. So, what's your take on that?
I think we have a really big opportunity, rather than looking at it as sort of it's a really bad thing. We use a lot of excessive energy and excessive products. We can really encourage our clients to be these sort of early adopters and these first people to do these circular projects.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah, and you are walking the walk. Some of your stuff in Selfridges is not at all is not traditional retail lighting, if I could put it that way. Mark, I'd be interested in your view as well. As a designer, I mean, you've done retail in the past. How do you see that as how do we get clients to walk the walk there?
We have done retail mainly in the shared areas and the mall kind of environment, and it's much easier actually to do something that's really, really sustainable in those areas and drive light levels down, use daylight, and let appropriate contrast levels draw attention to the retail. So you actually, by lighting the common areas to a lower level, you actually emphasize the retail units themselves, and they have to work harder. where the problem is within the shop, I think, is actually about educating clients and getting them to accept contrast as an effective retail tool. You blast everything to 1,000 lux. Once you're in the store, 1,400 lux is the same. It's just your eyes adapt. It doesn't appear any brighter. Brightness comes through contrast and actually choosing what you want to be bright and what you don't want to be bright. But there is a big cultural challenge with clients. I mean, obviously there are, you know, there's the exception to that. There are the early leaders. Hollister would be a classic example of lighting dark deliberately, but there are other ones that do more sophisticated things and less extreme. But there are some pretty bad examples as well. And lighting, quite often, if you go in and tell them that they're not doing it right, you won't be with them for very long.
And that's the thing, it can be a point of difference. It can be a branding tool. It can be something to be marketed. It's very popular nowadays to be sustainable. So it's a positive thing for them to put a spin on.
Also, I'd be interested in your guys' views in terms of the conflict that Bruce talked about. And there is an inherent conflict, isn't there, between, you know, when LEDs came along, we had all these sexy integrated spaces with, you know, lighting embedded into the fabric of the building. And if we want to go down towards a demountable, you know, reuse, you know, components can be changed. Well, and we want less embedded energy in the physical lighting equipment. Isn't that a kind of conflict between can we still do the wow factor, is my question. So
you can still do the wow factor, but it does drive an aesthetic change. That's absolutely for sure. But it's not necessarily a bad one. It's just different. And that's where bringing our design partners on with, like, architects and interior designers and landscape architects, we have a key role there. If we explain why we want to do something and actually can energize clients so that they go, yeah, no, we want this, then it helps drive the design in a particular direction. But so it drives change, but not necessarily bad change, I think.
Yeah, and I think we're all quite guilty of putting in sort of one linear detail too many, aren't we? Like, we might light every bench or every shelf, and maybe that's not necessarily needed. And especially as more junior designers, when you sort of look at this topic and you go, God, this is so overwhelming, what could I possibly do to make a difference? That whole conversation of reduce. Can you remove just one linear detail from your design? Will it still have the same aesthetic output? Probably.
Just a few comments coming in. Saros Staciotti is saying, reuse is good, but could it slow down innovation and research? That's her view. A Gooding of Integral LED is saying that would it make sense to have a new design that involves areas with brand new sparkling products and secondary areas that have reused products, so that could receive the new products at the end of their useful life in a new start area, essentially a design circular economy building. So that was an interesting comment.
If you pick up on that one, then retail's a perfect example. That because so much of it is trackheads and spots, you could take them out of an absolute prime site when it's the design has changed, and maybe then instead of throwing them in the skip, we put them in a jiffy bag. And then they go to a secondary or tertiary site outside in a market town. I can be careful where I'm going, but we all know that if you go to some towns, some of the independent retail could do with a huge uplift. Why can't we do that?
But there's no easy answers to some of this. What about clients? What are clients saying? And will clients pay a premium for CE? That's the
clients that I've been talking to have been really enthusiastic, have been really very excited, and carbon neutral is really on their agenda. I think they're less connected to biodiversity and resource depletion, but zero carbon is really driving their thinking now. And if you personally, I think it's a weak driver of CE in lighting, but it allows you to get to the table and have the conversation and then explain why it's important. But generally, yeah, they're on on message, I think. In terms of price premium, no, they're not yet. But as I say, as resource depletion kicks in, it's going to be a much bigger driver going forward anyway.
Kristina?
Yeah, just to pick up on a part that Mark just said there. I mean, I think some clients might not necessarily care about material depletion and stuff like that yet anyway, but in terms of corporate responsibility, I mean, they would have signed up to certain agreements, or they will be, and I think that's perhaps where they are, especially some big clients too that I've worked with.
From our point of view, it's very rare the clients will directly engage with us because they've seen something on our website. They're engaging with us because they want some cool lighting. You know, that's almost secondary for most of the people we've been working with, and it's just a lovely, tip to them at the end. But in terms of charging a premium, yes, you can, and yes, you can charge to. I would suggest to be able to survey the existing schemes and see what you can reuse, and I think that's a very, very valuable thing for clients. Real value add. That because for us to get an electrician to do it's going to be a struggle. Whereas you'll understand what's in there, what possibly we could reuse. Tape's probably completely impossible, but like Bob mentioned about the track and spots, there's lots of stuff that you might be able to use within that project. So yeah, there's maybe not fees, but there is value add in terms of other services you could offer to your clients.
Presumably we need the whole supply chain to jump together on this, don't we really, and everybody to move, because it's such a systemic change that we're looking at. And we've got designers buying in, we've got manufacturers seeing opportunities there, but how do we infill the other bits such as contractors, wholesalers and others? Nigel, I'd be interested in your view on that. How do we get them, how do we get everybody along, the guy taking the luminaire out to handle it with care and to make sure that it ends up in the right stream? How do we do that?
I think you're right, and it's down to communication, but also what we're trying to do is to identify in advance where product coming out might be capable of reuse. We may need to provide so that it's actually, they're protected rather than just going straight into a skip, because that's the risk. They go into a wee skip, but in that process, in the process of pulling them down from the ceiling, they get damaged. So it's engaging with the owner of the building and with the contractor, and providing them with the tools to make sure they are protected, so that we can get them to an organization that's able to remanufacture and reuse them.
James Poor is saying, I think every shop refit should have a Ricolite van parked outside the door. And he's not the only, I mean, Stone Lighting do this. They park a van outside for they'll remanufacture in the truck, and they'll take product away in the truck. I presume that's something we're going to have to see more and more of as we go along.
And I think
I think that's right. There's, but I don't think it would be one model. There will be a multiplicity of models. There's another manufacturer who sells decorative lighting, but from heritage, and what they give their clients the opportunity is that if they hand back that luminaire at the end, then they'll give you a new one for a much reduced price. And so there's but at the moment, a lot of the innovation is coming from the small companies who are kind of fleeter of foot. But even when you're looking at companies, Whitecroft, for instance, did a big refurbishment scheme where they could have sold a whole load of new kit and chose not to. So even the big boys are, I think, really looking at their value proposition and innovation. But you are right, it's the whole supply chain needs to react.
And we need to add to the supply chain, because there will be new business models emerge from this of companies that will just remanufacture, I presume. And also manufacturers will have to look at their business models of the take, make, waste model, which they've had for years.
Yes, having the original manufacturer getting access to their own product when it becomes waste is a concept known as IPR, individual producer responsibility. And that makes a lot of sense, because the original manufacturer should be the organisation in the best position to be able to assess the product, potentially remanufacture it, and then make it available for a second life. So there's a lot to be said for joining those dots and making that circular.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we're going to dive into those specific topics about reuse and extending in our future webinars. So on October the 7th, Thursday, we have the one on extending the life of luminaires, which will look at reuse. And then on Thursday, 28th of October, we have designing luminaires for end of life. And as I said, you can register for those on recolight.co.uk. Follow the links. We're going to wrap up here because we're at the end of our time. I thought it's been we've obviously just touched the surface, and obviously there's big stuff going to happen in this industry over the coming years if we're going to make a fraction of this actually happen in the real world. So thank you for all your insights and your comments, and thank you for everybody else for your questions and comments. Thanks to Bob, Kristina, Mark, Sophie, Bruce, and Nigel, and thanks to Suzanne behind the scenes, taking care of all the stuff in the background. Thank you, guys, and we'll see you again on the 7th of October.
Thank you, and thank you to you, Ray, for your hosting. Much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.